Hello, and welcome to our session on remote learning, how to build success for students. I'm Diane Kimsey, and I am your pre-K math consulting teacher. Along with me today is my partner, Robin Dixon, and she is the pre-K to 5, the ELA Social Studies consulting teacher. We'll start off with our learning intentions, as we always do. I love the little expression, WALT, what are we learning to? Today, we are learning to successfully teach all learners in phase 1 while we're preparing for phase 2, learning so that all staff and students will have a successful school year. And as always, the next step is our success criteria. You will be successful if you can. Build relationships with students in any academic setting. We're talking from using Zoom to being in your classroom, anywhere that you can build these successful relationships. You will be able to integrate synchronous and asynchronous lessons into any setting. We'll talk further as to what the two words mean. We will set expectations for our students. If you do this, you will have great success. Plan and prepare daily routines and procedures. It is so important. Kids love those routines. They respond well to routines. We need to build those. And of course, integrate technology into our daily lessons. It's an absolute must in this phase 1. And then, of course, our ultimate goal is we are preparing our students for phase 2, the micro classroom setting. As is true with any relationship, we need to build strong relationships, of course, with our students, with our staff, and the key to that, to build strong relationships, the key is to the success in both remote and in-person learning.
So why are teacher-students and relationships important, and why do we need to have those? First of all, it builds trust. A strong student-teacher relationship is one that is trusting. Students will trust you and they will come to you with their questions and concerns. It creates a safe place for students, and we know how important that is to the social, emotional development of our students. It also teaches risk-taking and learning and making mistakes. We know that students learn more sometimes from their mistakes than their successes, and we want to create a safe environment for students to do that. It also shows that just like our students, and we have similarities, that you know what, if I like to eat pizza, you might like to eat pizza too. And so we can build a bond over where we like to go and get our pizza. It allows you to know your students' strengths and their weaknesses, and we're able to better play to those strengths and help fill in and develop those weaknesses. It also increases students' academic outcomes, both short-term and long-term. So what are the characteristics of positive student-teacher relationships? Well, first of all, there's empathy. Teachers are able to empathize and understand what their students' experiences and home lives are like, for example. Unconditional positive regard. So the warmth factor, we always want to be positive, and we want to show that to our students, each and every one. Genuineness. Students can tell when we're being genuine and when we're not. And so it's important that we are genuine and that we know when we're maybe sending signals that show that we aren't. Non-directivity. We want students to also be able to develop relationships, and we want activities and relationships to be two-sided. We want students to be just as engaged in a relationship than we are. Encouragement of critical thinking. in our relationships, we don't want to just ask questions where they're one-way answers. What did you do this weekend? I went to the park. But really, what was your favorite activity at the park? What would you do differently next time you went to the park? So we can develop critical thinking skills while building relationships. So what you'll see on the screen is a form that you can use if you are needing additional information in how to establish relationships in distance learning. And what this bit.ly link will do at the bottom is it will take you to this form, and you can rate yourself and you can see, how am I doing building my relationships with students, especially in a distance learning environment. As we know that we may need to use different tips and tricks and dig deeper into our pockets in order to do successful relationship building online.
Okay, so now peer-to-peer relationships. They are, of course, influenced by the teacher. So teacher relationships are influenced by the teacher. You know, our students, they're watching us very closely on Zoom, even if we don't think they are. If we respond, you know, that student asks another question and we put our face into our hand and we're like, oh, again, or we let out a sigh, or we, you know, roll our eyes. We're being watched by our kids, and how we react to that student is how our students are going to react to that student. And so we need to be very conscientious of this. And so as it says on the screen, we need to model how we want each child to be treated by the teacher and, of course, by their peers. All right, a chilly classroom. Oh my goodness. All right, I think this is so important. This screen really talks to me. We need to value and welcome each child. I believe that we should have a little checkoff sheet that as each child comes onto the Zoom, we make sure that we call them by name. Good morning, Amanda. Good morning, Jimmy. Good morning, Jaron. Good morning. You know, we need to talk to each and every child and call them by name. Every child needs to be talked to in a positive way. You need to point out something with every child. Again, use your check sheet to know that you are doing this. I had a student named Amanda, and if I did not say to Amanda, good morning, and expect her to say good morning in return, I would have never heard that child's voice during the day. It is so easy for us to focus on those students who are the most talkative, the ones who are always willing to give the answers, the kids who are high achieving, because it gives us pats on the back of, hey, we're teaching, because look, Jaron knows the answer to my question. Oh, look, Callan knows the answer to my question. Of course they do. They are your high achieving students. We need to make sure that we're talking to the low achieving students too, or those who are struggling. Again, use your checkoff sheet. Have I spoken to? Did I say hi to? Did I ask this child a question? And the littlest successes should be always celebrated. You know, today, little Trey, for the first time, Trey offered an answer to a question without me asking Trey to answer the question. We need to celebrate those little moments. You can do air high fives to the camera, fist bumps to the camera. So please remember, we need to celebrate each of those little successes for every child.
So let's talk about increasing touch points and communication with your students throughout the day and throughout the week. Conversations and dialogues with students are extremely important. What we would call, you know, chit chat or social conversation is extremely important. As the student or a group of students come on Zoom, you know, ask a question to your students and get them engaged in talking with you and with one another. Diane alluded to this earlier, but develop a system for calling on students and noticing those who have not participated. Maybe it's a checkoff sheet, or maybe you have your can of popsicle sticks, or you have a deck of cards with students' names. But you want to make sure that you are touching each student every day in terms of answering questions and communicating with them. And notice those who haven't participated and make an effort to call on those students or let them know, give them some leeway. Henry, I'm going to call on you in 2 minutes to answer this question, because sometimes they just need a little more think time, and providing that can be a huge asset for students who are hesitant to participate. Always announce the student's name and make sure you have his or her attention before posing a question. Again, just giving them a heads up and giving them a prompt. Sometimes maybe their mind is elsewhere, and by calling his or her name, you're drawing attention to the question. Please remember that your virtual live sessions are limited. You want to make sure that your students are engaged, and engaged students are going to be actively learning students. So we will touch more on this in just a moment, but just remember your time is limited.
Okay, so let's jump into this. As you all know, we're starting in phase 1. We're starting with remote learning. Your students are not in the building. You may be in the building or you may be at home, but your students are not in the building. Perhaps they're at home, perhaps they're at grandma's, they're at the babysitters, but they are not in the school building. As I hope you know by now, we will remain in phase 1 until it is safe to move to phase 2. We will be given, Dr. Anderson and the Board of Education and others will decide when it is safe for us to go into phase 2. She is listening to the health department. She's listening to the governor. She's getting information from many different areas. We will be given a heads up that we are moving into phase 2. So students will be with you face-to-face, if you will, on Zoom. And when the students are live with you on Zoom, that is considered synchronous learning. And so when the students are with you, that is synchronous learning. You will be able to have these synchronous learning moments, so these live Zoom sessions with your students a couple times each day. Make sure you check that out with your peers and with your principal as to what time those will be. Now, this is the important thing. In the springtime, we were doing, that's when the pandemic started, and we were doing basically what we called panic teaching, if you will. We were just checking in with the students. Now, there was nothing wrong with that, but we are now intentionally teaching the full 360 minutes of each and every day. And so when the students are with you, that is synchronous learning. Again, we need to have each and every one of those minutes planned out and used very wisely. Then when the students are away from us, that is asynchronous learning. And that is when we will make sure that they have lessons to do at that time as well. And so teaching from your classroom. During this phase 1 time, again, if you're choosing to teach from your brick and mortar classroom, you certainly may. You need to create a routine and then manage that schedule. Again, children really respond beautifully to routine. If you always, I'm the math consulting teacher, and so if you always start with a fluency activity, by golly, the kids are expecting that. So start each day with that fluency activity. If you start each day with a joke for the kids, start each day with a joke. It's part of your routine. Just make sure that you have a routine and you manage that schedule. We're going to talk more about what is an effective lesson design, and we have other professional development about effective lesson design. So stay tuned and you will learn more. But again, we cannot express to you enough about being intentional. Ladies and gentlemen, we are teaching 360 minutes. And when the babes are online with us, when we are in those live Zoom classes, we're wanting to be building relationships. We want to be introducing and teaching academics and providing assignments, answering the kids' questions. So we need to be intentional. Every single one of those minutes needs to be well planned. We are not shooting from the hip. If you choose to teach from home, so for instance, right now, in recording even this session for you, Robin is in a school building. She's over at Bishop, and I am at home. So even if you are teaching from home, we need to make sure that you have a dedicated workspace. You know, back in the springtime, this teaching at home, this Zooming from home was new to pretty much every single one of us. Many of us chose to teach from our kitchen table. Now, there was nothing wrong with that, but several of us had issues with our spouses walking into the kitchen, the dog running in and barking, maybe our children coming in and needing, you know, a bowl of cereal or a snack or whatever. We need to go ahead and set up a dedicated workspace in our home that can be less interrupted, if you will. If the kitchen table is still the best place, by golly, use that space, okay? But we need to create a space and, you know, practice our routines, manage our schedule from that space. You might be thinking about your own children during the time that you're in Zoom. And this is where, again, manage your schedule. Make sure your children have the snack before you go into the Zoom. So this kind of thing. So plan, plan, plan. And again, those minutes that we're on with our kids on Zoom, we need to be effective with our lesson design, and we need to be intentional. Oh my goodness, each of those minutes are going to count.
So we have talked and used the words synchronous and asynchronous. Let's review and make sure that we are all understanding the definitions of synchronous and asynchronous. So first of all, synchronous learning is learning that's in a live Zoom session. And that's when you are with your student and with your other classmates, their classmates, and you are learning together. And again, you want to be intentionally planned because 30 minutes will go by very quickly. When we use the term asynchronous are the pre-recorded videos for all the content areas. Students will watch those on their own, and they will come to your synchronous time in your Zoom session where you will build upon those pre-recorded lessons. And asynchronous learning is work that's completed when they are not directly with you. It could be assignments, it could be a writing project, it could be a personalized or STEAM project. It could also be the time that they spend on Moby Max, NoReading, etc. And again, we want to intentionally plan for the work that students will be completing each day. Just like if your students were with you in class, you provide time for students to complete those assignments and work with you. You want to plan, what are your students going to do when they are not with you on the live Zoom session?
All right, so let's talk about Zoom, your minutes with your kids. So again, the synchronous minutes that you're with your kids these first few days. Oh my goodness, it's so important to build those relationships. We all know that. And so here are some thoughts. How will you build relationships with your students on Zoom? How will your students build relationships with each other while on Zoom? How will you build a sense of community, classroom community, while on Zoom? You know, these are very important questions that you can take care of personally, I think pretty easily when you are in the classroom, when you're in the good old brick and mortar, but we're not there, friends. And so we need to accept that this is on Zoom. And now, how are you going to create those? And how can you create those relationships and incorporate it into a math lesson, an ELA lesson, a science lesson, and so on? Technology, my goodness, we couldn't do all this, could we, without it? So how will you teach your students to use their iPad or their Chromebook? At this moment, my heart goes out to the kindergarten and the pre-kindergarten teachers with teaching their students how to use an iPad. The first graders, how to use an iPad. We're using Chromebooks from second grade on up. How are you going to teach your students to use those? How are you going to teach Zoom, Clever, and Seesaw to your students on Zoom? These are all things we really need to be working on, and at the same time, building those relationships up above. How will you integrate the academic content into the first few days? How is that math lesson going to get integrated through Seesaw? How is that ELA, the first story that the kids are going to read, how is that going to get integrated in the first few days? And at the same time, building up those relationships. And so there are some ways that we can create some student expectations. These are, please understand, these are sample ideas. You know, when the kids come onto the Zoom, go ahead, we're going to come up with some questions here. We need to talk to our class and say, all right, class, what should we expect to happen during our 30-minute Zoom sessions? We need to make sure that our device, and we need to make sure that the kids understand, what is a device? You know, that is your iPad, that is your Chromebook. It needs to be charged and ready for use. Well, what does it mean to be charged? We need to talk to the class about this. I think this one is a really important one. Arrive to the Zoom class on time. What does on time mean to you? We've all met those people who work on military time, and on time means 20 minutes before. We've worked with people who on time means, if you said 10 o'clock, by golly, 10 o'clock is when we start. How are you going to respond when the kids come at 10:05? So we need to set up, what does it mean for kids to be on time? They need to know what you are thinking. I think of Zoom as Brady Bunch. That's the era that I grew up in. But we need to make sure that our students label their name on there correctly. In your window, you have 3 dots in the top right-hand corner. When you click on those 3 dots, you can click where it says rename. We want our children to have their first name and their last name on there. We don't want them to be, you know, Snoop Dogg or whatever, football hero, whatever their little code name is. We want them to be who they truly are. And so then we need to talk to the class, and this needs to be taken care of the first day, the second day, and probably into the 3rd or 4th week. What does it look like when we say, when you come to class, when you come to Zoom, make sure you come ready to learn? What are you talking about? You know, some suggestions might be, all right, kiddos, make sure you brush your teeth. That just kind of wakes you up and says hello when you do that. Comb your hair if you can. Other suggestions might be dressed for class. Well, you know, you and I, we're supposed to look professional. This is not where we wear our Kansas City Chief t-shirts. Summer break is over, if you will. We are needing to be dressed ourselves and look like professionals. What do we want the kids to do? They don't need to wear a tie, but what, you know, at least maybe get out of your pajamas and talk to the class about that. Have the necessary materials. We need to talk to the kids about what do they need to have so they don't, wait, teacher, I need to go get. What do they need to have ready before they come to class?
So let's talk a moment about planning your Zoom instructional minutes. We've said several times you want to be intentionally planning those minutes. So let's take a look at what that might look like. So here are some questions to consider as you're planning your Zoom sessions. How will you chunk your time? Within that 30 minutes, is 5 minutes going to be a class builder? Is 5 minutes going to be a mini lesson as you were grading the work from the day before? You noticed a common error that all of your students struggled with. This would be a time to reteach that. If you don't chunk your time, what will happen is you'll look at the clock and you realize, oh my heavens, I only have 5 minutes left. And in that 25 minutes, we really haven't accomplished what we needed to. How will you build relationships with students? How will your students interact with each other? How will you build that into your Zoom minutes? Because just like in class, we have activities where we have our students interacting with one another. How will you engage your students in the learning? How are you going to make sure that they are all engaged and responding? Are you going to use dry erase boards? Are you going to do a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Are you going to have students, maybe you give a question and they rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 5, or 1 being answer A and 2 being answer B, and so on. We want our students engaged during this time because we know that learning is an active activity, not a passive one. And again, what opportunities to respond will you provide your students? So let's continue looking at planning our minutes. So for each Zoom session, how will you build in opportunities to create class community and build relationships? Which Zoom will you dedicate for math and which for ELA? Which part of math and ELA will you teach synchronously and which parts will be assigned asynchronously? So what is it you must do with students with you, and what can students do in their home environments alone? How will you integrate science and social studies into your math and ELA lessons? And you will also see a sample schedule. On the far right-hand side, you will see a graphic that says effective lesson design. During the effective lesson design session, these were all talked about in depth, and these are what an effective lesson would look like remotely or in person. And please remember that your math and reading live Zoom sessions will be 30 minutes each. At the beginning of each math and reading Zoom session, you will take attendance. Perhaps you had a student that showed up in the morning, but not in the afternoon. Just like at school, we would be marking that. You want to build upon the video lesson. So taking the skill or concept and building upon that. Perhaps it's place value, and you're building on the place value lesson in Eureka Math. The anticipatory set, you're going to ignite and engage your students' excitement. That's how you're going to get students excited about what you're teaching. And direct instruction, we know exactly what direct instruction is. And that also includes our teacher clarity piece of success criteria and learning intention. You want to review those with your students at the beginning of the lesson and throughout your Zoom session. A time for guided practice, checking for understanding, and how are you going to close your Zoom session? Now, in addition to your 30-minute live Zoom session, there will also be tiered time for math and for ELA. And that will be 10 to 15 minutes depending on the grade level. At pre-K, it is 10 minutes, and in our other grades, 15. And so we can use effective lesson design during that tiered time as well. Again, we might continue to check for understanding. We're going to be doing some reteaching. That's why they're there. They need a little more than what could occur in Tier 1. So you are going to reteach. You're also going to do small group instruction based on your data, whether that be an assignment, a formative assessment, or another form of feedback and testing. And again, you'll want to have closure for your tiered session as well. So please remember that the graphic to the far right is our effective lesson design that we will follow in the Topeka Public Schools.
All right, so let's talk about Zoom. Let's make sure we're all on the same page here. So some basic information. breakout rooms. Dun, dun, dun. All right, general education teachers. We're talking a second grade classroom teacher, a fourth grade classroom teacher, whatever grade it is that you teach. You should not be alone with a student. I think we all know this as far as in the brick and mortar building. This also holds true in a Zoom session. You should never be alone with a student. This also holds true for our paraeducators. Let's please not put them into a situation too where they would be alone. Never should an adult, a general education teacher, or a paraeducator be alone with a student. You know, you probably have heard this expression before, but it's true. It's very important that we follow that rule of 3 or more. In other words, 2 adults and 1 student if you really need to talk to that child. Or maybe, you know, you've got this one child and he's just really, or she is just really struggling with, let's say, an addition of fractions. All right, chances are you have more than 1 student that's struggling with that concept. Or you could say to, you know, little Callan, why don't you bring in your best friend? And so Maeve, why don't you come in and join us? And we're going to work on addition of fractions at, you know, 2 o'clock or whatever. But you have more than 1 child there. So that rule of 3 or more is so important. This is an important concept as well. Breakout rooms need to be chaperoned by an adult. So if you're, excuse me, if you're going to be using a breakout room, there needs to be more than 1 adult in your Zoom session. And so this is something that you would plan for. Maybe a para is with you every single day when you teach math, or only on Tuesdays do you have that extra help during math. Well, on Tuesdays, plan your breakout rooms. And you would only do, so if it's just you and 1 para, you're only going to do 2 breakout rooms, okay? And so breakout rooms need to be chaperoned by an adult. And remember, every breakout room, you need to be following that rule of 3. And then I think the last important thing here that you need to know is breakout rooms are not recorded. Let me say that again. Breakout rooms are not recorded. Your general session part, you know, your Brady Bunch room, that's recorded. But breakout rooms are not recorded. So it's he said, she said. Please do not get yourself in that situation. So each day, or after each Zoom session, so again, you're going to have more than 1 each day, you're going to download your session. Okay, each and every day you're going to download your session and you're going to save it onto your Google Drive so it doesn't eat up space on your laptop. And then after the lessons are downloaded, then you're going to delete them from your Zoom account so your Zoom account doesn't get all filled up and out of space as well. All right, let's talk about some of the academic integration. We have done, I think, a dynamic job of providing all kinds of technology for this remote situation. Again, we have iPads and we have Chromebooks. And so go ahead and we will share here. We're going to integrate Seesaw into our daily lessons. This is our #1 platform. We will be presenting the math, everything, ELA, their writing assignments, everything will be through Seesaw. We have all kinds of Seesaw professional development. Please sign up for everything and anything you can. Pear Deck, in case you're not aware of Pear Deck, Pear Deck is a wonderful way to bring in the Google slideshows and then have the kids interact and you click on Pear Deck, it's a little pear on your screen, and you have then slides where the children can be interacting. So please, again, we have all kinds of professional development on that. Screencastify is a great way. When I was a classroom teacher, I would have my students choose a certain paragraph in the book, and they would break out into individual areas. And using Screencastify, they would read that particular area or that paragraph or that caption or whatever it is to me. And it was a wonderful way so I could hear each and every one of my kids read. Flipgrid is one of my favorite tools, and we have the professional version of Seesaw, Pear Deck, Screencastify, and Flipgrid available for each of you. Flipgrid is a wonderful way for each kid to respond through a video and answer a question. We also have some technology. Go ahead there, Robin, and oh, no problem. No problem. All right, so we also have some academic online programs that our district has been so generous in getting for us. We have MobyMax, and we have probably, a good 10, if not more, MobyMax professional development sessions for you. MobyMax is available from kindergarten on up, and pre-K, I can definitely see you using it as well, but it's available for kindergarten on up. Name a subject, name an area, there's an activity in there for MobyMax. As a classroom teacher, you will need to monitor it, and you can make assignments through it. And we see this as a wonderful way of helping with your 360 minutes a day. Make a math assignment in it, make a writing assignment in it, a social studies assignment. Our district has also purchased for us a professional version of Newsela. Again, we have professional development out there on how you can use this in your classroom. No Red Ink. Oh my goodness, this is a wonderful tool that's available for us, online program. It's one that we are recommending for grades 3, 4, and 5 in teaching grammar and writing for that matter. Discovery Education, I'm so excited over this one was purchased for us. This was purchased for us for all grades up to 12th grade. You need a little video about let's say porpoises. That's one of the first stories for 4th grade that they will be reading involves a porpoise. We know what dolphins are, but maybe go out to Discovery Ed and say, hey, I need a video on porpoises. And you'll be able to find something, I promise you. Eureka InSync, we just got this just last week. Eureka, of course, is our math, and InSync means it is synchronized. We will be able to assign to our students, there are videos in there that Eureka Math created, and of course you're going to see that there are videos that our teachers in our district have created. You choose which one you want to use for today's lesson or tomorrow's lesson. But through Eureka InSync, you will have a PD later. This is a way that you can assign the PDFs, the worksheets, if you will, and there will be fillable blanks for the kids to respond.
So let's talk about Seesaw. As you have heard Diane say, this is going to be our platform that you will be using to post assignments and that students will be assigned to through Seesaw. So let's talk about some of our Seesaw expectations. First of all, you will need to have classes set up in Seesaw. And what's nice about setting up classes is that you can assign just certain assignments to given students. So you could do some tiered differentiation with assignments as well in your classes. Again, it is the platform for all assignments. You also need to think about what do you need to teach your students when it comes to Seesaw. We know that we used it last spring, but we also know that number one, students may have forgotten how to use those things, or we know that students have different proficiency levels within the Seesaw platform. So you want to be sure to teach them, number one, how to log in, how to use all of the tools. How do you use the draw tool, the record tool, the picture tool, and so on. They need to know how to access the assignments that you provide them. They need to know how to complete the assignments, because we know that in Seesaw, you can have students turn in assignments with a drawing picture, with a recording, with typing. So how do you want your students to be completing those assignments? We need to let them know. How do they turn in those assignments? We don't want to be looking at our work that night and saying, oh my goodness, I have 3 students that didn't turn in their assignment. And you follow up and it's that they didn't know how to do that. And so that's very different than a student not choosing to do his or her work. So make sure they know how to turn those in.
All right, this is a sample, and I really want to express this again. This is a sample of what a teacher's task might look like during the work day, okay? I've heard people teasingly say that, wow, look at all the free time we have. No, ladies and gentlemen, you do not have free time. You have lots of time to plan. Here are some things that you would be planning. This is your planning and prep time, all right? You will have Tyler SIS documentation, for instance, that attendance that you just took in your first Zoom. You will need to go in and document, okay? This is where you're going to be able to create. You will have time to create those Seesaw lessons. What is it you want your students to do in math? What is it that you want them to do in writing? All right, so you will have time to plan your Seesaw lessons. Lesson plans for all content area. The videos that were created this summer are magnificent from our 501 teachers, math, ELA, social studies, and science. Here is your opportunity to watch those videos before you assign them. You need to know, what are the teachers saying or asking of the students? We've had people say, well, my kids didn't watch them last spring. Well, did you? And did you set them up for the kids? Did you give them a question? When you watch today's math video, I need you to listen for Mrs. Brokaw in the 3rd grade. Ask the students this question. I need you to be ready to answer it. So you need to set those videos up for success, all right? Number 1, you need to watch them yourself. During this planned time, this is when you can meet with your team, and perhaps this is also when you would have your PLC meetings. This is a great time to give your students some feedback and do the grading. We always say we don't have time for grading and whatnot, right? Well, now we do. I think this is quite a gift. You will need to enter those grades into Tyler SIS, look at your school, what are your school's expectations as to when you're supposed to have in your grades. Great time to create a Flipgrid lesson. Download those Google slideshows that are out there on Embark for reading, or excuse me, Embark is for math, and throw in a Pear Deck. This is a great time to do that. Screencastified videos. This is where you can create your own videos, perhaps for a project-based learning activity that you're wanting the kids to do. Great opportunity for you to do that. This is when you can plan and assign what is it you want the kids to do in MobyMax. No Red Ink, Newsela, Discovery Education, Eureka Math in Sync, and I could go on. And this is where you can make those assignments and you can grade. You can look at the information that is provided. My goodness, MobyMax has magnificent information for you, the classroom teacher. This is a wonderful opportunity for you to create your classroom, your class newsletter. Stay in touch with the adults in your children's lives. Create your classroom website. You have the time to do all this planning and prepping. We've been asking for it. Now we have it.
So it's also just as important to be planning your students' work minutes as it is your work time. So on the next 2 screens, you're going to see a sample schedule of what your students' schedules might look like. So for example, if we look at kindergarten through 2nd grade, right in the middle, you'll see they get 180 minutes a day of ELA and 90 minutes of math. Now, please note that within those time frames, 30 minutes of each of those is the Zoom session. But if we look at K2, we have 10 minutes tier time. We also have 140 minutes of independent work time. So what are your students going to be doing during those 140 minutes? Are they going to do some independent reading, independent writing? And in math, they have, again, the 10 minutes of tier time and then 50 minutes of independent work time. So what are your students going to do when they're not with you? And then we have 3rd through 5th grade. And on this next slide, we'll see science, social studies, PE, counselor, second step. So those will need to be embedded as well. So how are your students going to spend the time they're not with you? Be thinking about that.
Right, and again, this is a sample. This is a sample of asynchronous learning opportunities for your children, for your students. Again, let's remember, asynchronous means away. I always look at that A at the beginning of asynchronous. This is when your students are away from you. What will they be learning? What will they be doing? So during your plan time, you were able to plan for them. This is a great opportunity for them to watch that reading video before they come to your classroom. This is an opportunity for second step, have perhaps a writing activity, or maybe on Seesaw or with Screencastify, you could have the kids create a video for how they would respond to this situation in second step. This is a great opportunity. You need to decide, are you doing the application problem, the problem set, the exit ticket? What is it you're going to be teaching in class, the synchronous time? What is it you're expecting your students to do away from you in an asynchronous situation? Writing projects. What writing project do you want the kids to do? Where should they be in that writing process? Great opportunity to bring in project-based learning. Oh my goodness, I love this. You can do a STEM project or a STEAM project. What would you like for the kids to do on MobyMax? And again, let's not forget, if you're going to assign it, you're going to grade it or provide feedback on it as well. So what are your kids doing in MobyMax, Newsela, No Red Ink, Discovery Education? Every single day, your kids will have either a PE or a music lesson. So that's also part of your day. 5th graders, you get to have that instrumental music practice time as well. And then there's art. There are wonderful art activities that you can do to integrate, as you well know, reading and social studies or math and science. So these are all ideas of things that your children can be doing during their 360 minutes of learning each and every day. But you have to plan them.
So let's take some time to look at phase 2. So once we have been deemed safe and ready to go back to school, what's that going to look like? And we've heard the term micro classrooms, and that's what students will return to. So in a micro classroom, we know that that means reduced class sizes. So instead of 24, it would be smaller than that. Students will remain in class for majority of the day. We know that students may not be traveling to classes as much as they do in regular school. And our support staff will assist and lead with students in classrooms. So support staff being our interventionists, our STEAM teachers, our counselors, etc. So it's important to remember that each school will have a different model of delivery. So if you're unsure of what your school would look like when it goes to micro classrooms, your building administrator and leadership team should be able to guide you into what your school has determined for its mode of delivery with support staff. Now, we know that when students return to school, we know that hand washing and wearing a mask are going to be critical. And we know that KSDE has also provided us some guidance with this as well. So we want our students to know how to wash their hands properly. And you will see a bit.ly link. And this is the district video on hand washing. And as we are transitioning, or when we transition to micro classrooms, you'll want to teach students this ahead of time. Show them the video, walk them through the process so that when they enter back into the classroom, it will be more seamless and you are able to keep on teaching without having to spend the time to instruct these areas during class time. So again, the video link there is right there that you can also go and watch the video. They are super informative and short and to the point, so they'll be great for our students. We know that the guidance has been to use hand sanitizer or wash your hands each hour. And we know the importance of wearing a mask properly. And again, you'll see a bit.ly link for the video that the district has created for mask wearing. And again, you will want to show that video prior to class so that students come in the first day to micro classrooms with masks on properly and ready to learn.
All right, and still, while we're in this phase 2 with the safety procedures, none of this should be new or unfamiliar to you, but we will have the 6 feet distancing, all right? So every single school has created a protocol on how students and staff members will enter and exit the building each and every time. You will need to go over this with your students before they come back to school. You will need to talk to them. What does it look like to keep this this social distancing of 6 feet? And so you will have some way of monitoring that or displaying that for your students. There will be temperature checks, and these will happen as each and every person enters into a school building. All people will be checked for temperature. And again, all of these things, we need to talk about this with the kids ahead of time so it is not a surprise, a shock, a fear, or anything of this sort. And masks will be worn by our staff and masks will be worn by our students. I just thought of something that I wanted to add in right there. If you should choose to do your Zoom classes from your classroom, you will not have on a mask, I bet, because you're going to be the only person in the classroom. I think I would share that with the students so they're not like, well, look at Mrs. Kimsey, she's teaching in the classroom, but she doesn't have a mask on. I think we need to make sure our kids know, kiddos, I'm the only person, and maybe even turn your camera so they can see I'm the only person in our classroom right now. And so it is safe that I can be without my mask. I think we need to share that with the kids. All right, so more about classroom safety. You know, these are some things that maybe you haven't thought of yet, but each of your schools have put together a protocol, a safety regulation, as you can see, on how to do things. But you will need to have a designated table in your room or space. I've heard the term people using dirty table. And this is where manipulatives are going to go that need to be sanitized on a daily basis. Perhaps, you know, a color pencil rolls off a desk and nobody knows whose blue color pencil that is. So it would need to go to the dirty table, if you will, to be sanitized before it goes back into the shared jar. Books are an interesting material that we need to have a designated shelf or storage area to put them onto. Again, you will be told in your building as to how you're going to quarantine books. I love that expression. And how long books or any paper material items need to be in quarantine before they can be used by someone else. Things that we also need to think about is setting up that schedule, because as Robin just explained, you know, we will be asked to use either hand sanitizer or actual wash with soap and water each hour. And so you will need to plan what time are you going to go, so you don't end up with congestion down at the end of the hall or wherever it is your bathroom station is, your water bottle filling station is at. We need to create a schedule. And then plan ahead of time think about this. How are the kids going to enter your classroom and exit your classroom? You know, where are you going to stand? Because again, you need to say hello to, good morning, Amanda. It's so good to see you. Welcome back to classroom. You know, you need to be in a place. You need to think about this one, sharpening pencils. We want to limit any type of congestion that we can in our classroom. You know, that used to be every kid's favorite place to meet would be at the pencil sharpener, right? Well, they need to be 6 feet apart from each other. And let's think about it. After Joey touches the pencil sharpener and sharpens his pencil, we need to wipe it down now before Sarah sharpens her pencil there. So we need to think about these kind of things. Where are you going to have the kids turn in their assignments? So this is where we may really, really be relying on Seesaw.
So as we finish for today, let's review our learning intention and our success criteria. So today we learned to successfully teach all learners in Phase 1 while preparing for Phase 2 learning so all staff and students will have a successful school year. So do you feel that you are more prepared for Phase 1 than you were before watching this video? And let's review our success criteria. You are successful if you can determine how to build relationships with students in any academic setting. Integrate synchronous and asynchronous lessons into any session or setting, excuse me. Set expectations for your students. Plan and prepare daily routines and procedures. Integrate technology into daily lessons. Prepare students for Phase 2 micro classroom setting.
And we thank you so much. There's so much to learn, so much to think about. And we know that if you go in with your expectations ready, if you go in prepared, as we all know, you will have a wonderful school year. We have complete faith in you. We are doing everything we can to keep every single person healthy. We wish you the very, very best. Please turn to your principals in your own buildings, your administrators, and your team that has worked so hard this summer to make sure that this new school year, and oh my goodness, what a new school year this is going to be, will indeed be a wonderful school year and a healthy school year. Again, I'm Diane Kimsey. I'm your pre-K through 5th grade math consulting teacher, and my partner is Robin Dixon, the pre-K through 5th grade ELA and social studies consulting teacher. We wish you the very, very best. Thank you.